Hi there, this is Shauna from the Foiled Fox, and I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I am featuring the new stamp and die set called Holiday Door. It creates this wonderful holiday door with wreaths, and you'll see here's the stamp set to it. It has two 4x6 panels that gives you all the details for the door that you need, and your bow and some pots and some wreaths, and then of course it has a matching die set. And then I'm also going to be using just a couple of things from Holiday House. I'm going to be using the bow and the garland, and I'm using the matching die set for that as well. And then to get started, I'm going to use a piece of soft stone cardstock. That's a Papertrey Ink paper, and I'm going to take Woodwork, which is a fairly new die set, and I'm going to just use one of those, the longer one. And then on white cardstock, I'm going to be cutting out the wreath, the door, two of the planters, and the bow, and I'm also going to be cutting out that garland along with the bow, all on this piece of cardstock. If you have followed me before, you know that I like to have everything and group everything. So here is the woodwork. That piece you do not have to have. You don't sweat it if you don't have that one. It's just a nice detail. And then of course I have the two planters, the wreath and the bow, and then the door pieces and the door frame. I have saved these little circles that come out of the wreath because we're going to use those in kind of a unique way. And then found that my little door handle was stuck there, so I have the door handle. And so I'm going to start out with the stamp that details out this door panel. It puts these nice decorative panels onto the door. I'm using true black ink. All the inks I'm going to be using today are Papertrey Ink cubes. And so this one's true black, and I'm just going to stamp this door down. And it instantly has this really nice detail to it. And then I'm going to start out, then do the wreath. I'm going to use New Leaf, and I'm going to stamp that. The stamp for this wreath that fills out this whole area. And I turned on my light box just so I can see the outline of my stamp and then stamp it. I find it easier to cut out small pieces and then stamp them, but you can do it conversely, which stamp them and then cut them out, whatever works for you. Now there is this other wreath, and I have stamped it up with pine feather. You can use this other wreath separately because there is a die for it, or you can stack them like I did here. And then now I'm going to put some berries onto the wreath. I'm using pure poppy. And there's just this cluster of 3 little berries, and I'm just dotting them around on the wreath. With the wreath done, I'm going to move on to the bow. I'm using pure poppy, and I'm going to just ink up this bow really, really well, and then stamp that. Again, I like to use the die and then stamp, but you can stamp and then use the die. And then there's a little detail stamp, and I'm using Autumn Rose to stamp the detail stamp just to give it a little bit more character. And then we'll go on to the planters. The top of the planters with the leafy part, I'm going to stamp that first, and I'm stamping that in New Leaf and then adding just little bits of pine feather here and there. If you've followed me before, you know that I like to combine ink colors. I think it adds a little bit more interest instead of having it, just one solid color. And I'm going to ink the other one. And then we'll go on to inking the bases of these, the actual pot of this container. And I'm using Weather Vane ink, and I'm stamping both of these. There is also a detail stamp to this one, and we're going to use that one, so it gives a really nice design to the pot. And that one I'm going to stamp with Smoky Shadow. And I really like how this adds so much character to your pot there. It's kind of an urn looking pot, isn't it? And so I'm going to stamp this last one, so I have 2 to go on each side of the door. And then there's that little door handle. I'm going to stamp it with true black ink. Get that all lined up and then stamp that. So these pieces are all done. And then we'll move on to those pieces that we cut out, the garland and the bow from the holiday house. I'm going to ink the bow up with pure poppy. I found that I couldn't quite leave it in its negative space, so I'm going to take it out and stamp it and turn on my light box so I can see the outline of it. And now I do want to leave this garland in the negative space because I am going to color it with Copic markers. You can see the colors on the screen. I use YG03, G03, and then G28. And I just do this because I want a little bit of variation, but you don't need to do that if you don't want to. Just cut it out of green cardstock and you're good to go. Now I'm going to just kind of fill in those areas of the bow using R27 that didn't quite cover, and then I'm going to use the R39 and add in some shadows. I'm going to do the same thing to this little bow. It really doesn't take very much time to add these little extra details, but if you want to skip them, you can certainly do that as well. So now I have all those little bows ready, and I have that. I'm going to go on to the door. For the door, you can see I cut out another door just to show you. You can just use colored paper, and I used weather vane paper there and then stamped it in true black ink. But I'm going to color this door with Copic markers. So I'm going to start out first with C0. I'm going to use all C's because I want it to be a gray door. You know, the great thing about this stamp set, though, you can use any color and it looks fabulous. And then I'm going to go on with the lighter colors. And I've put the list of the C colors that I'm using. And I just go from light to dark, leaving the centers to be a little bit lighter. But I'm just building up that color. So I do go from the C0 and I continue on using 1, 2, 3, and then 4. But I just add this all in. And then I add my darkest colors. And I do this because I want to get that shading in, but I'm going to go back with my light colors, and I'm going to do this a few times, and I'll smooth it out. I want to just really smooth out that color, not have it be so stark. So I just, it doesn't take a lot to do this other than just a teens of time. But it's not scary to color it. You practically can't go wrong. You just want to go from light to dark and then go back to your lights with adding some color. And then if you feel like you need to go back to add a little detail like I'm doing here, you can go to the darker colors. Again, just around the detail areas, and then I'll go back and smooth it out with a lighter color. And I just want to finish out this door. So you can see the difference with seeing the weather vane one. I am going to take the darkest marker here and this mark around the panels just to give it a little bit of detail, but that's all I'm going to do to this door if I was going to use that one. Now I'm going to take the door frame, and I'm just taking one of the lighter colors, and I'm just kind of outlining it. And if you're not sure what color you'd like to use, start out light. You can always add color, but it's harder to take it off. So I just add some shadow onto the door frame, want to keep it fairly white. And then I have these little pieces that I had from the center of the wreaths, as I told you, and other things you can cut out. I'm going to color them with R32, and then I'm going to go with R27, and then put in the last bit the dark colors of R39. Then I'll take that little stamp of 3, the cluster of 3. See, I'm putting in the R39 here, but then I'll take that cluster of 3 and stamp them with true black ink. That will be the center. So I'm using that berry cluster to be the cluster of my flowers. Now I'm just using my hand, and I'm taking this little skinny dowel actually, but you can use anything. You got a Q-tip or something, just pull off the end, use that just to make it a little bit more dimension, and the paper kind of curls up so that it looks more flower like. I wanted my urns to not only have the greenery but have some nice poinsettias, and I thought this was a good representation of some poinsettias. And I only used 3 for each one because I didn't want to overcrowd the green. And then I'm going to add on with a little glue my door handle, then add on the framing. It's like creating a house here. That's actually what we're doing, creating the front of the house. And so my door is all done because I've glued that around. Now using a card base, I'm using Pure Poppy card base, and it's 4.5 by 6.5 when folded. And then I have a white cardstock base that is 6.25 by 4.25. And then I have white cardstock that I'm cutting into 3/4 inch strips. I need about 8 of these. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a background of the front of my house, and I wanted kind of this slat kind of look to my front of my house. So I'm starting at the bottom, putting just glue in the center because I'm going to have to trim those edges. I don't want to go all the way to the edges. I did make these strips just a little bit longer so I could trim them and get a really nice, clean, sharp edge. So I'm just very slightly overlapping them. Now I happen to have a grid here on my workspace, so I'm using that to kind of make sure that I don't go off to Joneses there, that I make sure that I keep them fairly straight. And that's actually what I'm using. And then I'm just putting that, you don't need to get crazy with the glue, just enough for it to stick. So now it's all on that whole panel. I'm taking the darker color like a C5, and I'm going just underneath. Actually, I did on top, which is like using a C1, and then going underneath with a C5. And I'm just doing that to add some shadow, and then I'll go back and I'll smooth it out with a lighter color. Again, I'm using that same grouping of the C markers for the Copic markers. And then see, I have that little rough edge. I'm just going to trim that off so those pieces come off. Now I could have not kept them, just cut them all the right width to begin with, but it doesn't give you as smooth of an edge. Now I'm going to take that piece that we cut with the woodwork die, and I'm just adding a little bit. Again, these little darker C colors of the Copic markers. You could leave that step off. You don't even have to have the woodwork. Actually, you can just leave it all white if you'd like. I just wanted to have show part of the little porch of the house and have it to be this wood there. And I'm just tucking it underneath that that little lip there of the strips that we put on. I'm going to just glue that into place and then trim that off. Now I'm going to take this whole panel and I'm going to just stick it onto our red card base. So you can see now we have the front of our house here. So we just need our door. We want to make sure that the door is centered. And then I have a piece of black cardstock, but we'll just put the door on first. I'm going to just glue that, and I am going to use a ruler to make sure that I do have it in the center. I love these see-through rulers because you don't have to do complicated measurements. You can just count how many squares. It's really easy to know exactly if you've got it in the center or not. And so now that I know that I have it straight and it's not tipping and it's in the center, then we'll set that aside. And we'll go on to creating the sentiment. Now the sentiment I'm going to stamp on this strip of black. I think it's like 3/4 inch because it's the size of the slats that we made. And I'm stamping it, the sentiment that's included in the stamp set. I stamped it with Versamark ink, and I am now white heat embossing it. Use a lot of anti-static powder for this so it comes out really clean. I had to go back in with a little bit of a brush and brush it in because I didn't put quite enough on there. And now we'll just heat emboss it. We have the great reveal. Just love when it starts to melt and it starts getting darker. So now I'm going to just put it there over the woodwork, and I'm going to angle this out starting from the outer edge of the door and going outwards quite at a sharp angle, because you want to get the right perspective for this so it looks like a mat. And then I marked it with a white pencil, and then now I'm going to just erase those pencil marks now that I got that mat just the way I want it. So now see, it looks like I have a mat to the front of my door, and it's kind of a welcoming mat. And you want to make sure you get the right angle there. Experiment with a piece of scrap paper if you're not sure, but do really kind of splay it out. And now with some foam tape, I'm going to add on our little planters there with our poinsettias. Now the fun part, isn't it? We get to decorate everything because everything's done. We add on the wreath with the bow. And now I'm going to add that little bow right above the house. That's why I made this card a little bit higher. I just wanted a little extra decoration. I didn't want it to look squatty. And I'm measuring that to make sure that I've got that in the center as well. And then I'm going to take those green garland once I've got that all straight. I did put that on with foam tape. These green garland, I'm not going to use foam tape at all. Just going to, in fact, I'm just going to tack it at the top and the bottom. And now I have a charming garland to go above our door. And now it's all finished, and I really like how that comes out. Now I want to quickly though show you another option that's a little more casual. Those urns are more formal, but I took from Holiday House again. There's this tree, and I cut out and stamped 4 trees, and then I creased it in the center. I did 4, you can do 2, but I did 4 because I wanted to crease it in the center. I'm adding dimension to these trees, and I'm going to take 2 of them at one time. I'm going to trim off, I did stamp this pot, and I'm just trimmed off the bottom, trimmed off the top, and now I just have this little pot left. And I'm going to take these trees that I have creased in the center, then take another tree and put it right on top of it, so that I am creating and just put a little line of glue so that I have 2 stacked on top of one another, and I can fold up the top edges. So you can see I can fold them up because I only glued it down the center. You don't want to glue this all the way down against the other tree. That's what gives you a little bit of dimension to your tree. And so there you have that one. You can see here it is all finished. It just gives you a little less formal look, or a little different look. I could have also put some ornaments on it. There's lots of ways I could do that. And then here is the one that we completed in the very beginning that gives us that little more formal look. You can decide which one you like. I just love this door. I think that they're fabulous. I hope you enjoyed it too, and if you did, please give us a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe. We would just absolutely love that. And then just to quickly recap, I used Holiday Door Stamp and Die Set and a little bit from Holiday House. You can pop over to our blog and check out all the supplies and tons more inspiration. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.